A budget airline bet everything on a rescue deal, then watched it collapse in weeks. Spirit Airlines had been bleeding money for years. Every flight operated on razor-thin margins, which meant every unexpected cost threatened the entire operation. Then came the pandemic, which nearly finished them off. But Spirit survived, and by 2023, a rescue deal emerged. It seemed like divine intervention. Major investors and creditors came together with a restructuring plan that would inject capital and restructure the airline's crushing debt load. For the first time in years, Spirit's leadership could breathe. Employees thought their jobs were secure. Customers with vouchers believed they'd finally be able to use them. The lifeline had arrived. Nobody knew it was about to be cut. Here's where the rescue deal hit a wall nobody expected. Spirit Airlines had lined up what looked like a lifeline, a restructuring plan that would have reorganized the airline's massive debt burden and kept planes in the air. But there was one group that had to sign off: the bondholders. These are investors who'd loaned Spirit billions and held claims on whatever the airline might be worth in the future. And they said no. The bondholders crunched the numbers and realized the restructuring terms left them holding massive losses. In a typical airline restructuring, you'd expect creditors to take a haircut, maybe recover 50 cents on the dollar. But Spirit's math was so broken that even those terms weren't good enough. The bondholders looked at the airline's trajectory, saw years of red ink ahead, and decided their money was safer not going into a sinking ship. When the largest creditors walked away, the entire rescue collapsed. There was no plan B. Spirit couldn't refinance on its own, couldn't find new investors willing to bet on the airline, and couldn't restructure without bondholder support. Within weeks, thousands of employees lost their jobs, and millions of passengers with future bookings watched their flights get canceled. The takeaway: even a rescue deal is only as strong as the creditors willing to fund it. Once the bondholder revolt killed the rescue deal, Spirit Airlines had almost no runway left. The airline was hemorrhaging cash daily. Operating flights requires fuel, crew payroll, and maintenance whether passengers are on board or not. Without a restructuring plan or fresh capital injection, Spirit couldn't sustain operations for long. Within just 2 weeks of the deal's collapse in late 2024, Spirit filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, liquidation, not reorganization. Chapter 7 means the airline doesn't get a second chance to restructure and emerge stronger. It means shutdown. Flights were canceled. Planes were grounded. Tens of thousands of passengers found themselves stranded with worthless tickets. What made this collapse so brutal was the speed. Spirit had operated for over 2 decades, survived 9/11, survived the 2008 financial crisis, and made it through the pandemic. But when the rescue lifeline snapped, the airline had no cushion. No alternative funding sources materialized. No other buyer stepped in. No creative restructuring saved the day. The domino effect spread instantly. Passengers lost their flights, employees lost their jobs, and creditors faced massive losses on their claims. A major U.S. carrier simply ceased to exist. Spirit's collapse showed that in the airline business, there's a razor-thin margin between survival and total obliteration. Spirit's collapse is a symptom of a deeper disease in the ultra-low-cost carrier model itself. After 2008, airlines like Spirit, Frontier, and Allegiant emerged with a radical promise: fly for $30 if you accept paying for everything else. Seats, bags, water, all separate line items. It worked brilliantly during recovery when travelers were desperate to save money. But that model has a fatal flaw. Airlines operating on 3 to 5% margins have zero room for disruption. When fuel prices spike, when labor costs rise, when customers demand basic amenities that competitors now offer for free, there's nowhere to cut. Spirit couldn't compete on service, couldn't raise prices without losing passengers to Southwest or JetBlue, and couldn't shrink costs further without literally removing seats from planes. Other budget carriers face identical pressures. Frontier and Allegiant are profitable now, but they're walking the same razor's edge. The question isn't whether Spirit failed, it's whether the ultra-low-cost model itself can survive in an era where legacy carriers have learned to compete on price while offering actual service. Here's what Spirit's collapse really teaches us. Surviving a crisis and solving a crisis are completely different things. Spirit made it through the pandemic, but it never fixed the core problem: a business model that couldn't generate enough profit to service its debt. When the rescue deal fell apart, There was no plan B because the fundamentals were broken. Even a major U.S. airline can vanish when the math doesn't work.